alive! It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Hello and welcome to Alive After Reading. I'm your host, Tim Niederreiter, author of various books and mostly fantasy and science fiction. And with me today is a returning guest to the show with a very special topic on this very special episode. Hi, J. Daniel Sawyer. J. Daniel Sawyer, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you. It's good to be back.
Well, it's great to have you, and you've got some good news and some interesting news, let's say, for the listeners. So tell people a little bit about what you've got going on right now over at Kickstarter.
Oh, well, my name is J. Daniel Sawyer. I'm the author of 30 or so. It's more than 30 books now, but not all of them are published, and I can't keep track of how many are currently on the market because I'm writing more. Science fiction, mystery, fantasy. Science fiction, mystery, fantasy, nonfiction, and my newest nonfiction book is currently kickstarting on Kickstarter right now at HeinleinSecrets.com. It's called The Secrets of the Heinlein Juvenile. It is the first ever in-depth study of the 12 plus a few books that started young adult literature in the United States, and especially that started young adult science fiction, and also pioneered the genres of military SF and pioneer SF, and a few other things. Extremely historically important, and more importantly for all of us who are great fans of great books, they last forever. They have never been out of print. The estate employs a Disney Vault type of strategy where they cycle them in and out, but there's always more than half of them on the market, and they always sell, and it's been 70 years since the first ones were written. And they still sell. Parents hand them to children. And this doesn't happen with other amazing children's books from the era. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to know why. And I studied them for 10 years, and I figured it out. And I've written in-depth literary study going into the literary roots all the way back to ancient Babylon and all of the traditions that Heinlein pulled together and the literary techniques he used to make these books sticky and unforgettable and so inspiring that all of the men who walked on the moon gave as their answer for entering the Apollo program, well, I really liked rocket ship Galileo when I was growing up.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's influence. You can't buy that. That kind of power.
Exactly.
You know? And that's the kind of thing you can only you can create, but with the the right traditions, all the things you were just talking about. Yeah.
Yep. But yeah, if you've ever seen a movie or read a book with Nazis on the moon, farmers in Marines, space cadets, they all come directly from this corpus of books.
Yeah, and they're fascinating. I remember when I was a teenager, I think I only read one of them. Actually, I only read Starship Troopers because I was a big fan of Ender's Game. That's kind of my era at the at the time. And so I went and I read Starship Troopers after that. And there were a few. I read some of Heinlein's short stories, but I think of the Juveniles, I only read that one at the time. And then I read Have Spacesuit Will Travel.
That's my favorite one.
It's good.
Yeah.
They're all good.
That's the one I go back to for fun most often.
Oh, interesting. Why is that, actually? I'm not sure if you mentioned that in the book. It's been a little while since I did my beta read of it.
No, I didn't mention that in the book. So the reason it's my favorite is because, well, I'll just give the fanish answer instead of the analytical answer.
Sure.
The dynamic between Kip and Pee-wee, the two leads, is enchanting, and the theme of the confrontation with the gods at the end blows me away every time. It's incredibly emotionally powerful. It's got a deep mythic resonance that I feel all the way down to my toes, literally every time I read it.
Now, that's a good answer. You say that's Spanish, but I say that's pretty solid regardless. I mean, a book that can be both fun and then deliver this kind of power is a special event. And obviously I think we all strive for that kind of thing. At least I do, because I think of myself as an entertainer more than an educator when it comes to writing. But I can't help. I mean, how could I be an educator? I don't know anything about myself, let alone anything else. But anyway, that's not the point.
That's one of the reasons That's one of the reasons we write, right? We're learning about the life that we're trying to figure out how to live.
Agreed. Yeah, honestly, the different periods of my life are defined by the books I was writing while they were going on.
Yep.
And
yep.
Yeah, because that goes for many people who've been writing for a long time, I think.
Yep.
Yeah, and
you look back and you have a metaphorical autobiography. Yep.
Exactly. Anyway, so you've got this. This book it's already funded, right? But people should jump in on this because it looks like.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah. It looks. It's a fascinating creation.
Yeah. So we funded in the first 24 hours. It's now 4 or 5 days into the campaign. We're at almost 4x of the goal, which the goal was pretty low. It was $1,000, but we've got stretch goals that we're knocking out one after another, and I'm dropping also free secret rewards behind the scenes at major milestones. There's if this thing goes to $5,000 or $10,000, I'm going to wind up having several extra books I have to write for the campaign.
Good place to be, though. As
well as a whole bunch. Yeah. So if you want to hire me and make me your bitch, so that I can do more of this kind of literary analysis for writers and students, it's the place to go. And there's also other rewards for people who are just fans that are going on as well.
You heard it here first, folks. You can make Daniel Sawyer your bitch for the right contribution. Your literary.
That's right.
Work bitch. Yeah, something like that. So Dan, you've got all this. You've got this intense love for Heinlein, obviously his work, and a lot.
Yes.
I've heard you talk about him on other shows, on other podcasts, maybe the Dead Robot Society, possibly some other ones as well. And your mentioning of how deeply, and of course on your Everyday Novelist podcast, how deeply these books affected you, and still, like as you said, you still go back to them. What exactly? I mean, if you could boil it down, I'm just going to do the challenge part. Okay, if you could boil it down, for you personally, what's the main reason you find these books resonate so strongly? And I mean, they resonate strongly with a lot of people, as we no doubt have found. Obviously, they're still going on.
Heinlein is one of a handful of authors for me. The others being Mark Twain, Douglas Adams, and of course now I'm blanking on the other two that I had. J.R.R. Tolkien, and a few others like that who. When I read their stories, I get simultaneously a flavor of the grand scope of human experience, a highly localized taste of the moment in history that they were writing, and a sense of wonder, delight, and irony that isn't tinged by idealism. And that's always been hard for me to find, especially that last part. Most novelists write primarily from their ideology, and by that I don't mean that they preach constantly. God knows Heinlein was prone to preaching in some of his books. What I mean is that is that most people have a very small experience window. They live in a microculture. And no matter how excellent their prose is, their characterization, their plots, their themes run up against the walls of that microculture very, very fast. And there's a class of writers. They're not all great writers of history, but there's a class of writers that I constantly gravitate to when I stumble upon them, who, because they had unconventional childhoods, or because they traveled widely, or because they experienced something that broke their worldview when they were early on, they existed as people slightly dislocated from their time. And because of that, they were able to look at, and not even without intending to, some of them, they look at and see humanity in almost a little bit as an outsider. And because of that, they're more accessible to a reader who doesn't belong to that same subculture.
Ah, okay. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. And, yeah, because they can bring people into this experience, to an experience of something beyond what the reader is necessarily used to experiencing.
Exactly, and because they have to do that through their whole lives, because they're always a stranger in a strange land, at least in a small way.
Yeah.
They're able to bring the readers along to their strange land because they know that they have to do that little bit of extra reach, or be willing to step outside their own comfort zone that little bit extra.
No, that makes sense. And actually, that strikes me as possibly being an advantage for me now that I think about it. Most of the things about my various conditions make me feel like I started started high jumping from within a well, as I think Michael Stackpole mentioned on one of his podcasts. But because that was years and years ago back, that's a podcast I call back to, even though I was like 13 when it came out.
the Secrets podcast, right?
Yeah,
was
exactly.
Yeah,
that's
that was
what he
a good
called
one.
it. It was, and even though he wasn't necessarily able to instruct, like it also, I mean, really that podcast really taught me the limits of instruction, because he knew a bunch of ways to write better, but I couldn't do any of those things until I learned how to do them, which is kind of tautological at that point. But one of the things that about the, like being autistic, having all these other problems, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm weird, and I know I'm weird. And I know people don't see the world the world the same way I do. So I have to get used to. So I had to get used to this at a pretty young age just to get along with other people.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, and I had the same kind of thing going on. I moved from Texas to San Francisco when I was 7. And then in the middle of the 80s, and so that put me in an experiential bubble that was wild. And by the time I got and I also grew up in the religious right. And so by the time I got to college, I was way, way outside the main of anybody I'd known. And anybody I've ever met since, I've always been a stranger in a strange land. And that's probably also why these writers appeal to me, because I recognize the kindred spirit behind the prose.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you can wander a lot when it comes to fiction without ever necessarily... I mean, because I know there's writers out there who are writing much more myopically, and not to criticize too heavily here, but they're writing much more either to form, to a genre, or they're writing much more in the sense of, this is how I actually see the world. And I think, and I'm not necessarily even going to try to convince you that it's right, or that it's how the world actually is. I'm just going to say, this is only for the people who already agree with me, kind of thing. There's all this, and I'm not saying like in a political sense either necessarily. The people who see the world the same way they do will get this story. The people who don't will not.
Right. Well, it's like that old joke. There's two fish swimming in a stream, and they bump into each other, and one says, "Why, good morning, the water's very warm today." And the other one says, "What the fuck is water?" Absolutely,
yeah. There was a pretty good David Foster Wallace speech called "This Is Water." People should check that out.
Yeah, that was the founding metaphor for that speech. But yeah, it's very much that kind of thing. The people who for one reason or another have they've either never had a home pond, or they've been forcibly jumped from one pond to another. They see the water, and the people who haven't, they don't. Mm-hmm. And I think that the writers that I gravitate to are the ones who I can tell by the way they write that they see the water.
Yeah. So and Heinlein specifically has
very
obviously
much so.
Exactly. Obviously he captivated your attention enough to reread all his books intensively and write this excellent volume here. Because it's and it's clear to me because Heinlein is kind of, I think we've talked about this before, maybe even on this show, but Heinlein is kind of notoriously hard to pin down if you just look at his books in a vacuum because of the as to what he believed in real life, because he's writing from all these different perspectives and all these different kinds of stories.
Yep.
You know, Starship Troopers
and he was
How Spacesuit Will Travel, very different stories.
Yep. Very, very different in their attitudes towards everything as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Aside from there's some very basic values that run through, but the way they get inflected in politics and religions and interpersonal ethics through all his books are so radically different that if you only read one of his books, you get a completely inaccurate idea of what he might have believed. And and add on top of that he was basically a troll. Temperamentally speaking, and you can see this in his 1976 Worldcon speech, which is available on YouTube, or in his commentary on the Apollo moon landing. He really liked to get people's goat. So he goes on the Apollo moon landing with Arthur C. Clarke and Walter Cronkite, and as soon as there's an opening, he starts giving NASA shit for sending men to the moon because women should have been the first astronauts. They consume less oxygen, they consume less food. Because they're smaller, they're more maneuverable. They've got better stress reaction properties, neurologically speaking. And he's like laying all this out. And in 1969, and Walter Cronkite is sitting there going, "How the fuck can I change? Can I get this guy off the show before he gets me canceled?"
Somebody bring out the giant, the giant cane.
Yeah, somebody bring out the giant, the 16-ton weight. Whoop.
Yep.
But but he had this sense of, very much like Mark Twain, he had this Missouri sense of mischief where he could size up pretty quickly what the reaction of the people he was talking to was going to be, and then he would tweak what he was doing in order to get them riled up. And he writes, several of his books are written just to rile up the audience. And it's hilarious. But it does make it very hard to pin down.
Yeah, exactly. If you know what he's doing, you can. But either way, I can appreciate an author who can create such varied stories while still remaining, even in the same genre for the most part. Not even, even though they might be creating subgenres like Starship Troopers in a way, or pioneer science fiction. These are different, but even though they might be in different subgenres now, these are all created by the same guy, and they could serve the same audience, and they can broaden that audience's worldview because of it, which is what's so cool, among other things, about Heinlein and his work. Yeah, though I was also very impressed when I read the book, as I was lucky enough to read it in advance. I was very impressed by the amount of detail. And just, like you say, it's a scholarly book in a lot of ways. The amount of detail with which you summarize just these 12 books. I almost feel like I've read them, even though I've only read a few of them. At this point, I haven't read all of these books, but I got a good enough picture. I will probably eventually read more of them, but I don't necessarily have to enjoy this. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. But what happened was that I had started just to do the analysis of each book. And then I realized that not everyone picking up the book is going to have read all of these. And even if they did, they probably won't have read them 500 or 600 times a piece like I have. So they won't have it all at their fingertips. And so I started off doing a brief summary and then the analysis. And then on the read-through, I realized there's not enough detail in the summary for the analysis to flow from it. So I then sat down and I read each book instead of listening to it, which is normally how I consume books when I can get away with it. I sat down in my writing chair and I read each book and I summarized as I went. And then redid the analysis after that, and it expanded the analysis sections quite a bit because, of course, even if you've been exposed to something 500 times, you lose a lot of the details that created your impression of what you were going to say. So it turned out to be a good way to do it, even though it was supposed to be a very, very small pamphlet that I could get out of the way so I could write the next fiction book on my list because I was supposed to sit down and start writing a Heinlein Juvenile because I've resurrected the forum, and I now do one every year or two. And instead of writing a Heinlein Juvenile, I started writing about them. I'm like, God damn it. Stupid subconscious. So I have to write this nonfiction book before I can go write a novel again. Fine.
Oh, what a brutal obstacle, though. It looks like it read like you put a lot into it. So, and I'm sure many others will agree with me that level of dedication it pays off, and it seems to pay off here for sure.
I was so satisfied when I finished writing it. It was as if this book had been waiting to come out for 4 or 5 years, and it just finally arrived. And it's not that it didn't take a lot of work, but that as I was writing it, I realized that there was a lot more going into it than just what I was doing at the keyboard.
Yeah. So Dan, anything else you want to add about the book? I mean, I honestly, I could ask you questions about it for a lot longer, but I don't know what should people really be taking away from it, you know?
Well, what I'm hoping it does, and please do keep asking me questions, because I've been doing a lot of interviews, so my creativity for spontaneously saying new things is going down. But what I'm hoping people will take away from it is, well, there's a couple different groups. I'm hoping writers will take away from it that this is a viable literary form, every bit as well defined as the epic and the romance and the thriller. And that they can pick this form up and write in it. And some of the structural components of this form bring with it built-in resonance. I'm sure that, you can screw up anything, so I'm sure that if this gets mass adoption, there'll be a lot that are forgettable, but there's deep culture built into the way that the form is put together, and that gives writers an amazing advantage in communicating with their audience and connecting to them on multiple levels at once. So I'm hoping it inspires a conscious revival of the form, because I think it's a great form. I love these books. It's every time I find someone who's accidentally done one, I just jump for joy and love reading them because the form is so beautiful. The second thing I hope it does is for genre fans, people who are interested in literary history, Heinlein fans, and homeschoolers and students, what I'm hoping it does is help connect, because the Heinlein Juveniles form this junction point between all, well, not all, but many of the great ancient literary traditions coming from Babylon and Greece and from Germany and from the Celts, and then spin at that junction point, they spin out into the future into all these different, not just forms of science fiction, but forms of fiction in general. And being able to sit at that junction point and dig down into it, what I'm hoping it does is it helps people get a sense of the deep cultural continuity that connects them to everything that's gone on before and everything that's coming in the future. One of the things that I see among my nieces, among some of my younger listeners at the Everyday Novelist, is a profound sense of dislocation, as if they've been born into a world that has no place for them, that has no history, that they have to invent themselves from scratch in order to have any hope of even having a satisfying life, let alone a joyful or meaningful one. And one thing I'm hoping this book does, especially if it gets picked up by schools or homeschool pods or whatnot, is help show the readers that terrible, terrible sense of being alone in the universe that they have is an illusion, and that there are deep connections that they can tap into, that they don't have to invent themselves from scratch, but that they can be part of a grand story. And that they can choose which part they want to play in that grand story.
Yeah, I mean, therefore, get up and prepare to fight, as the Bhagavad Gita says, they can go forth. They can do the things that they want, that they not only intend to do, but the things they want that they want to do in a way. I mean, the things that are not only required of them, but the things that they determine they would like in their lives. I mean, that makes so much sense. Yeah. I don't know why I threw in that Bhagavad Gita line. I've been listening to that audiobook a lot. It's the one audiobook I like. Anyway.
There's another great deep literary tradition. The Hindu literary tradition is
absolutely amazing. Yeah. And that one's one of my favorites from that tradition, but there's a bunch of other ones too. There's actually quite a few amazing stories and works in that.
It's been a long time since I read the Rig Veda, but when I did, that was revelatory.
It's and it's one of those the strangest things about, the modern world is that people think that because things are old, there's a lot of people out there who say because that's so old, it doesn't apply anymore, when in fact it's almost the opposite. It's almost the exact opposite. It's like that thing is old and it's still read, not only because of the quirk of fate that allows us to still have the text, not so much a quirk of fate in the course of religious texts. Those are kind of designed for people to keep copying them. But they are, and reproducing them so more the future generations will have them. But there's more. But there's all this power that derives from the lessons in, say, the Bhagavad Gita, the Rig Veda, the Bible, any of these texts, these ancient texts that are still read to this day. Anyway, that's my soapbox. I'll step off of it.
Well, no, but there's something really important in what you're saying, and it's something that Heinlein as a writer and Tolkien as a writer really understood, which is that which survives because it has undergone a sort of evolutionary winnowing. There's something about it that transcends its own time and compels people to pass it along. And for that reason, anything that's lasted more than 2 generations has something in it that's timeless. It may not be timeless enough to survive forever, but there's something in it that hits a part of the human spirit, the human psyche, as truth. It may not be articulable, it may not be propositional, it may not even be correct.
Yeah.
But it is meaningful in a way that's worth paying attention to, because that's how you learn where you might profitably spend the tragically limited time you have.
And not to be flippant, but speaking of time, no, we are running low on time here.
I'm okay with keeping on if you want.
We can, but unfortunately, I have blathered too much in the pre-show, and I am running out of time.
Okay.
It happens.
No, just anytime we get together, I budget extra time because sometimes we burn up the.
Oh, absolutely! I mean, it was like when I was on your show last time, and that was an insane. I feel I'm a little embarrassed by how much I went off there, but it happens. It's something I do.
Well, we were going to go 20 minutes. We went about an hour, yeah. But no, it was a great show.
Happens. It happens. It was a lot of fun too. And so definitely people should go check out the Kickstarter, The Everyday Novelist. Remind people where they can get the Kickstarter again, though. That's the one they should really be looking at right now.
You can find the Kickstarter at HeinleinSecrets. You can go to Kickstarter and search for it, but I got the domain HeinleinSecrets.com, so it's easy to find. That's HeinLein secrets.com.
Excellent. People should check that out. And I'm going to do a brief plug for myself here because I do it all the time now, but I didn't do it enough in the past. So you can find my books at timniederwriter.com/books. You can find all the links there. You'll see the big list of the big wall of covers, as a lot of us authors have now. And yeah, definitely you can go there and find all the stuff.
I noticed that you have the domain name Tim Need a Writer as well.
I have that one too.
Hilarious. I found that yesterday.
Oh, did you? Well, I'm glad you did, because that's what it's for. It's supposed to just point people toward the other sites and stuff, because I already had a site, mentalcellularpublications.com. That's where you can find the rest of this podcast. But nobody can spell my name. Nobody can spell the name of my other site and the other names for my site either. So timneedawriter.com. It's a good place to start, honestly. I should update it again soon, though, because it's getting a little out of it. Yeah, whatever. It happens.
Yep.
It has its way of passing. No problem.
Mind if I plug my other big project?
Go for it.
So you can find my blog and just about everything I've done at jdsawyer.net. You can find my daily podcast for writers at everydaynovelist.com. And you can find my ongoing series about geopolitical history and the way that the world is changing underneath us. It's non-political, non-partisan. It's purely a historical analysis at jdanielsawyer.substack.com.
Sweet. Sounds. I mean, you've got a lot of fascinating work out there and a lot of fun stuff too. Let's be fair here. You're not just a scholar. You are also a great novelist.
No, I'm not. Yeah, no. I also do very gonzo stuff. My fiction tends to be either very serious or really lighthearted and silly, like the Suave Rob books.
That I know we just did the plugs, but I want to jump in on this for a second because
sure.
I want to say I said we were out, but we're not. We're being pulled back in. No, so folks, just bear with me for a second. Because I've noticed that I'm kind of, I mean, like I like to do it all at once. I like to have maybe a light moment or two in this kind of like intense action or adventure story that usually has some romance in it too, because that's just what I do. And I don't know why I have my own like genre or like subgenre. It's just the sort of books I write, and they're all kind of the same in that way. But maybe I need to try more variety. I don't know. I mean, I'm just rambling.
well, yeah. So like you, my serious stuff is not dour. It's intense, but it's moments of levity, moments of beauty, moments of whimsy, and I tend to approach fiction like music. So a composition has a flavor, but it's never one note. There's always things that go into it. What I tend to find is that there's, especially if I've been doing a lot of analytical stuff for a while, or if I've been doing something dark and thrillery, for my own creative vibrancy, for my own sense of delight in what I do, I just want to cut loose and be crazy sometimes, and so I like to sort of upend the formula and do stuff where it may touch on serious topics, like Suave Rob 3, my adrenaline junkie accidentally gets sold into slavery.
Wow.
But approaches them in a sort of irreverent, whimsical way where it just, at the end, just leaves a smile on your face. It's, delight is the handmaiden to earnestness, and I think if you get too much of one, delight and irony, too much earnestness without delight and irony, what you have is stale and no fun. And sometimes you can mix them all together, and sometimes you mix it by creating a meal where you've got, here's a big serving in this book of earnestness, and here is a big serving of delight and irony.
Right. And, you can't just make a meal that's only salt. That would be bad. Yeah.
Right.
That makes sense. And so anyway, folks, that's your little bonus tidbit for today, because I am, as I said before, out of time. It's tragic, but it happens. Thanks for listening, everybody. And thanks again, Dan. That was awesome.
Thanks for having me, Tim.
Oh, it's always great to have you. Come back anytime. The door is open. Well, not open, but you can find the key. It's hidden under the doormat. So you're welcome back anytime. And thanks for listening, everybody. Stay safe out there, folks, and have a great week. I'll talk to you again on Sunday. And with any luck, everyone will still be here. Oh, why did I have to put it like that? It's too dark. I need to bring in something lighter. Thank you for laughing. Take it easy, folks. Bye-bye.
That tears it.